is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, everybody, here we go. Welcome to episode number 201 of Sports Cards Live. It is Saturday night, October the 7th, 2023. My name is Jeremy Lee. And as always, I want to thank last week's guest, Mike Baker, and everybody who joined. Feel free to check that out on the YouTube channel or on podcast. That was an excellent episode. I do recommend you go back and take that in if you have not yet. Also want to let everybody know, next Saturday, there will not, unfortunately, be an episode. I will be in Las Vegas. And the Saturday after that, I am also not going to be doing a show. I will also be unavailable. So a couple weeks off, but there will be other action here on the channel. And I would like to ask you to join close to 500,000 people who have downloaded the Center Stage app across both iOS and Android for quick comps and card management features. The app is the fastest and most accurate at card shows or at home to help you price your cards. You can build, organize, and share your collection with your friends and other collectors to follow using their social sharing features. They have grading partnerships and marketplace features are coming soon. So check out their Instagram account and join me in supporting the great team they have and the innovation that they are undertaking. Also want to shout out Leighton Sheldon, Just Collect. He'll be joining us for the Vintage Spotlight feature. And also want to thank everybody who stopped by the Tag Grading booth at the Del Mar Show today, and we'll be there tomorrow. Tag Grading. You can join the Discord and the Facebook group from visiting the website, taggrading.com, and the communities tab. Also, I want to thank Nick and Larry from Sports Cards Madness podcast. They had me on, and that pod, I believe, dropped today. Also, Greg Langto and Cody from Mojo Breaks podcast for having me on their show this week. So Cody from Mojo Breaks, Greg Langto from his podcast, and then finally, also, I want to thank Sportsnet 650 Vancouver for having me on their radio show, Pastime Radio, the collectibles show. That was this afternoon. Also, thank you to all Sports Cards Live sponsors and partners, and all of you loyal viewers and listeners. If you are not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast, please take a moment and do so. As always tonight, your comments, your questions are in play. So let's get to it. Tonight's guest, he started in the hobby collecting New York Yankees and New York Mets cards in the 60s. And in the 70s and 80s, he started doing licenses for players with Topps and Cy Berger. His favorite team right now is the Arizona Diamondbacks. His favorite athletes of all time, Mickey Mantle, Muhammad Ali, Joe Namath, and Julius Erving. That's a Mount Rushmore right there. Originally from Westchester, New York, currently hailing from Scottsdale, Arizona. Let's bring him out, Ray Schulte. Welcome to Sports Cards Live, Ray. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, Ray, you're welcome. You know, I feel like I've known you for a while, a couple of years anyway. We see each other at all the card shows. You're always you're there. You're at the shows. You're doing what you do. We'll get into what you're doing, but I feel like it's a long time coming. So thanks for making the time, and it's good to have you. It's a good follow-up to when we had the new management team from the National on the show about 6 weeks ago. So again, good to see you. So it's a long time coming, as I say.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we see each other all the time at various shows throughout the country, Toronto, and it's always great because I enjoy watching people like yourself who are really engaging and really take the time, whether you're educating somebody, whether you're trying to find out some information, and you just have an ability about communication and being authentic. And those are two things that are critical if we're going to have a community in the hobby.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate the kind words. It means a lot coming from a veteran like yourself. Let's get a bit into your hobby history. I mean, you started out collecting as a kid, but tell us a bit about some of your earliest experiences of opening those original packs of Topps trading cards.
Yeah, I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Westchester County, and there was the kids that bought the packs, the Topps packs, with the bubble gum, and but we did it really just because we wanted to flip cards and play with them, put them in our spokes, and even though we were collecting, I was a catcher as a kid. So, guys like, Elston Howard and Thurman Munson, those are guys that I gravitated to. And obviously growing up in Westchester, it was the Yankees. Now, a lot of people don't realize that, like when I grew up in the Westchester, we didn't get down to Yankee Stadium that often. And so, collecting cards kind of brought us closer to the game itself, and so it was fun. But I also collected Beatles cards, and looking back, I probably had a couple of mantles too. But I don't regret any of that. I mean, I have such fond memories of how those cards brought us together. And how we went home each night wondering, like, or looking at what we had and what we took from our friends, and in terms of winning, and so it's all about memories. And for me, that's what the hobby's about. But back then it was just a great. Then I went into high school and then college, and I kind of drifted away from sports after college because I felt like I was just burnt out. And then for some reason I got back into it, but it wasn't really collecting. It was more so just enjoying the sports. And I didn't have, like growing up, I didn't have card shows. I didn't have hobby shops per se in my town, so I didn't get to enjoy that and get educated and move on. It was all independent, pretty much so. And we did it on the in 8th grade, we did it on the playground, but that was the extent of it. So
what I like is that, you're not somebody, I don't believe, who's been immersed in the hobby your whole life. But when you did get into it in around, we'll get to it, but I believe in around 2013 or so, you had the familiarity, you had that, the nostalgia that I talk about a lot. And a lot of collectors, most people watching, we understand the nostalgia. So, it's nice to know that, you when you did get back into it, you weren't someone who had never collected sports cards. It's something that you probably, it must have really been like, oh, this is something that I can get into again now, maybe at a corporate sort of level or a promotional level, because I remember collecting cards as a kid. I loved it, chewing the gum, flipping the cards against
Right,
the walls,
sure.
like you said, that's it's really cool.
And when I did get into it, it was pretty much when I went to New York City and I started working for an ad agency called J. Walter Thompson, and it's probably at the time the largest in the world. And so my responsibility was I was an account exec, and my responsibility was to go out and secure talent. And then this one project we were working on, they asked me to. I pretty much, we knew who we wanted. It was Sugar Ray Leonard, and we wanted Sugar Ray Leonard Jr. too for this hot cocoa commercial. And so it was my task to go after him. And so I did do the due diligence and found his agent, is an attorney in Baltimore, and I contacted him. And many of the younger people may not realize this, but Sugar Ray Leonard was a really, really hot commodity back then with 7-Up and a number of other. He was red hot. And so when I talked to his attorney, he basically said, yeah, we're interested. He sent me a 8x10, and he sent me a 1-page bio. And at that point in time, I just said to myself, this is in the early 80s by this time. I just said to myself, you know what? I've had the experience of kind of packaging and branding, let's say a box of hot cocoa from start right through to retail sale. I'd like to do that with athletes. And at the time, I was really young at the time. And I was on a kind of fast track in the ad agency. But, I felt like there was something that I wanted to do. And I wanted to package athletes just like, we were packaging hot cocoa. And so, back then, like there was only a couple of agencies, maybe ProServe, IMG, but they were for more like tennis and golf. And there was no real agency for athletes for like baseball, football per se. And so I decided that's what I got it in my mind. That's what I'm going to do. On a chance meeting via a friend in Clearwater, Florida, I got to meet Pete Maravich, and Pete and we talked for 4 hours. Where as I say, Pete let me talk for 4 hours, because Pete was, I was telling Pete what I did, and he was so fascinated by what I did in terms of how we package and how we present and how we sell. And he said to me, he goes, Ray, I wish I had somebody like you when I was playing. And I said, well, why is that? He goes, well, I didn't have somebody. I had my dad and an old attorney that we had, and that was it. He goes, I'd be a millionaire if I had somebody like you. And so I said to him right on the spot, I said, well, that's what I want to do, Pete. I said, I'd really want to package athletes. And he goes, well, if you're interested, I'm going to connect you with my partner. He was running a basketball camp in Clearwater. And his partner was a guy named Jim Krevax, and he was All-American at University of Texas basketball. And at the time, he was a real young guy too. At the time, for whatever reason, he was representing about 30 baseball players, A, AA, AAA. Nobody in the major leagues yet. And so he said, talk to Jim, and he called him up. So I met with Jim the next day. And I said, Jim, I'd like to work on all the things off the field, and you can obviously work with the field contract, and that will give you more time to do more contracts and secure more players and all that. So Jim goes, that's a great idea. He goes, I got to present it to my board. He had about 10 guys on his board. He goes, come back with a plan. And so I went back to New York, and I devised a business plan, which took me 6 months because we didn't have computers like we have here, and I did everything by hand. And I came down, presented to them. Halfway through my presentation, they said, "We're gonna bring you on. We're gonna support you. We're gonna back you in terms of this endeavor." And that's how I got started. And I quit my job, and it was funny because I was walking down the aisle of my ad agency. I was thinking to myself, all these people on both sides are more experienced and smarter than I am. Why am I doing this? And it was really, and I say this to a lot of the young people, it was really from the gut. It was the passion, and you got to act on that. You can't let that slide by. I'm so happy I didn't. I'm so happy I activated it, and so I started. And Don Mattingly was one of Jim's clients. He was only in AAA at the time, but I was in New York still, and so Donnie was one of my first clients. Harold Reynolds, Spike Owen, Howard Johnson, a whole number of them. Steve Carlton was I got to know because of this, and so it was great. And I started out. And I just realized that it wasn't going to be as easy as I thought. But I had the just the passion enough to keep going. Fortunately, I got a relationship with Adidas. Adidas was going from a boutique agency to Y&R, which is an international agency. And so they were going through a transition. So they asked me to come in and make that transition. So that kind of got me through the first couple of years. But it just kept going until I started working with other players. I got to work with the leagues, and at that time too, in the '80s, that's when licensing really exploded. And there was a real uncertainty in terms of who can do what. I mean, I can't tell you how many trips I made to the Players Association and to Major League Baseball because nobody was on the same page, and we representing players. We needed to get some answers. And so I got to know the union, and I got to know the MLB really, really well. And then when the Major League Baseball got the idea of creating a fan fest, they came to me first. They came, Ray, we're creating this fan fest. They were actually going to do it in Chicago in '90, but they didn't have enough time, so we pushed it back to '91 in Toronto. And my responsibility was to bring in exhibitors, hobby guys, and also licensees, and kind of make a show within a show. And so that's how that kicked off for me. And I did that, ended up doing that for 10 years for Major League Baseball. But with that, the NFL came to me, and they wanted me to work with them. And so I had 4 years, 4 Super Bowls. I did 9 NHL All-Star games and 9 NBA All-Star games. And again, I was working with the hobby, and although it wasn't really, it wasn't really presented that way back then because nobody really knew what was going on. But it's funny, even at the National now, I go around and there's people that used to exhibit with me at these league shows, and I haven't talked to them since we did the shows, and it's so refreshing to hear and also to know that they've been successful since that time. So that indirectly got me into the hobby. And then again, with working with all my players, again, the 80s was a time when there was a lot of forged signatures. There was a lot of unlicensed merchandise. And so I was always protecting the players, making sure, that everybody knew that wasn't my player's signature, or working with, I work closely with Major League Baseball in terms of their program that they have today. And so that again, but working with the players, I did it to protect the players, but I also did it to maximize opportunities for them. Signings and licensing, and signings with licensing, and so it was really an exciting time for me. And it's one of those things where you're just navigating, and you don't really know because there's really not been a path like that taken before. And so I was working with the athletes and the leagues and the PA. So it was really kind of fascinating, and it goes on from there. But it's a long story.
Well, we'll get into a bit more. I want to go to some comments. I have some follow-up questions for you. We're going to start with the follow-up. So, in the early 80s, when you got into the business with J. Walter Thompson, and it seems to me like you were perhaps on the cutting edge of, player endorsement deals, that sort of thing. And up until then, what was that landscape like for these players? Were they being treated fairly? Were they getting ripped off here and there? And were you somebody who came in and you said you were looking out for them, but just how much of an impact did you and maybe some others that were doing what you were doing after you, what kind of impact did you guys have on the landscape of player deals?
Well, that's a good point. And just to make clear, there were other agents that I worked with throughout the country that we were all, we needed to do that because, John Boggs is an agent. He represented Tony Gwynn, and he's got a whole number of other athletes out of San Diego. John and I used to talk all the time, and about 4 to 5 other agents. And we would just figure out what's going on, well, if we did something, I would let the other agents know about it and vice versa, just so we could create a path that we could feel comfortable with. But back then, there was questions about, what Major League Baseball would permit you to use. Like, in other words, at one point they were saying, you can't use the marks. They were saying you can't use the pinstripes, which was false, but, and it comes down to artwork and all these questions that, in the past, Major League Baseball and the union were just doing it and just, I wouldn't say getting away with it, but, there was nobody challenging them. And so for us, we were going back and saying, well, there's a Coca-Cola wants to do this with 3 of our players and all that. Well, the union would say, well, that's a highlight agreement, and and they would challenge it. And so it was a lot of things of just redefining or actually defining what the players could do. But photographs, posters were big back then, and bobbleheads and a lot of things that were really come to question. And a friend of mine, and I won't name names, but it got to the point where they said to me, you know what? If you come to us and you ask us if you can do something, we're going to say no. And so it made it a little bit more difficult because not so much. But basically, what they were saying was, listen, we're not going to let somebody come in and do something and say yes to it, and because what happens is once it leaves the office, it can be interpreted a million different ways. So the easiest way to do is just to say no when there's a circumstance that needs to be clarified. And so it was really challenging but exciting at the same time. And back then, remember Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden, all these guys, Mark McGuire, were all part of this growth period of the 80s, and they all, Jose Canseco even, they all kind of, were looking to branch out and do things, but they had to have the proper direction, because otherwise you could turn around, you get sued, and you negate a great opportunity.
Yeah, well, interesting stuff for sure. Orlando, a collector's dream, says, awesome background and experience. Thanks, Ray, for sharing your story. Yeah, it's a great story. Dave Marino, the groundwork Ray has laid is incredible, truly foundational. And Merle World says, who is responsible for the junk wax era explosion, Ray? Was it you? Just kidding, but good stuff. Also want to say hello to Justin Bode, Jake Dahl, Paul Masheri. Welcome to the show. Mike, good to see you as always. Jeff McMahon, vintage card collector, Perk, Chad Shipper. So good to see everyone. What's up, Dave Marino? Great to see you, buddy. Jeff McMahon, good night to be a Diamondbacks fan, Ray. 7-0 lead over the Dodgers. Very good, very good. Stukes in the house. What's going on? Justin, yeah, it's all about the memories and structure, baby. Gary Cooper is the man, the poster over what is your left shoulder. Rich Klein is here, says, always glad to hear Ray speak, and a great move by the National to keep you and Megan for continuity. Very nice. Kamikaze, well, I don't know what that's about. 90s Hockey Collector, good evening to you. Pistol Pete, there we go. Brendan Ryan, hello to you as well. And okay, well, yeah. Oh, the professor is here. Glad, yeah, this is episode number 201, Ray. You're the beginning of the next era, the post-Diamond episode era right there. Mookie Chilson says, Dwight Gooden had a big deal with Toys R Us. I bought all of the Spalding gear there. Yeah, you're nodding like you remember that. Jim, what's going on? Good to see you live. Been a while. And on-campus sports cards, hello to you. Anything you wanted to follow up with there, Ray?
No, I mean, I think for me, it was an exciting time, and it's great to hear people, recall that, because, there were some great memories. But yeah, we were part. Mattingly was part of Toys R Us, and but that's a good topic, because back then there wasn't anything out like there is now. I mean, licensing back then was really. It came out from the dark, really, and it kind of exploded. And so, like, Toys R Us took advantage of it, and other companies took advantage of it, but they had to make sure they got the player's license to it. And that's when the PA stepped in and the league stepped in, and or if I had a company that wanted to do something that needed the MLB marks, I would take them to MLB and make sure that they heard the entire story, and hopefully, if it was a good enough deal for my players, I try to talk them into giving them that license, and then I'd go over to the PA, and I can't tell you how many meetings I had with Donald Fear and his team in terms of, again, because they didn't even know. It kind of spurred in terms of, you can't, the players are looking at it saying, hey, well, yes, we are union. We understand the concept of union. We understand we're all together, but there are a lot of individual opportunities, and there are also maybe individual plus maybe 2 or 3 other players in that package to make it worthwhile for the client to proceed with the product. And so we had a lot of negotiating, we had a lot of talks, and but it all worked out for the best. And I think years go on, and there's so many. It was so enjoyable to work with licensees back then. I don't know. I mean, if you look at it today, there's very, very, very few licensees the way we knew it. I mean, hell, when I took Cal Ripken through his Hall of Fame, we had 36 licensees for 3 QVC shows. And that was just for Cal. But there was like over 100 licensees back then, and it was fun, it was enjoyable, and I also always thought that the licensee aspect of it really kind of was a grassroots growth for the sport, whether it's football, baseball, whatever. And sometimes Major League Baseball would look at it that way. Others, depends upon how much money was generated, but. There were a lot of good people out there, and I enjoyed working with all the agents and the players, and obviously the times have changed where now you have major sponsors coming in and just taking multiple categories. And so the leagues don't need those little small mom and pop licensees anymore. And that's a shame, but that's, nothing you can do about it. That's the way it is today.
That's the way it is. Well, let's skip ahead now and talk about how you got involved with the National Sports Collectors Convention back in, I believe, 2013, and how, Mike Burkus, who was the leader of the management team back then until his passing. How did you get involved with that? And tell us that story.
Well, just back up a little bit. I was in Arizona at the time. I was down here in Arizona with Buck Showalter, and then Buck got fired, and I was here, and I said I found my dream house. I found the house I want to retire in because I love the area so much. And then at the 2001, Cal asked me to represent him. And so I said, sure, yeah, why not? Yeah. And so I started working with him. I was based out here. I traveled to Baltimore back and forth. And finally he said, Ray, I need you here. So I had to move to Baltimore, which wasn't that bad. It just that, I had to leave my dream house behind and sell it. But I got there and I represented Cal for 10 years. And I had my son, Ryan. And at that time, my wife she got a job down in D.C. with CSN Sports Washington, and so I left Cal, and it was 2009. I was out in Cleveland, and I was out there on business, really, with some other players, and I saw Mike Burkus, and I always knew Mike. To say hello to, because he was always one of my guys that I thought that I liked to converse with, and just he was a good guy to be around. So anyway, he said, "Listen, you're in Baltimore." I said, "Well, kind of now. I'm moving a little bit," but he goes, "Yeah," and he goes, "Well, we're doing Baltimore next year." And he goes, "Would you be interested in doing the communications side of it and work with the mass media, work with credentials and help us?" And I said, "Can I think about it?" And I said, "I'm really interested." So the next day I called him back and said, "Yeah, what do you want me to do?" And so it was kind of a leap for me because I didn't know what to expect, but I did know Baltimore, and I did know I had a good feel for the hobby, and I knew I trusted Mike, and so. I started working as a director of communications for the National in 2010 in Baltimore. We had a great show. Obviously there were a lot of things that went along with that, with the new stadium and the All-Star game there. But we did really well. And so he goes, "Well, you want to do it next year?" I said, "Okay." And so we did it next year. Then we're going back to Baltimore. So anyway, to make a long story short, it was just like he never even asked me if I was going to do it again. He just assumed that I was coming back, and I just assumed he'd have me back. So there was real. We never had a contract. We never had a 1 year or anything. It was just based on his word. And I miss him to death because he was one guy I trusted implicitly, and he gave me so much respect and really listened to my ideas that I had. Now, back then there wasn't a lot of situations where you like take a lot of risk. But having said that, we talked about it was all Mike who brought in the main stage, and he had a reason for it, and he had a vision, and it's really actually worked out. And great, he also talked to me about he introduced me to David Gelfman and said, "We're doing a Breakers Pavilion." I said, "Okay," and so but he knew it, and Mike was one of the guys where if he called, I would just drop everything, pick up the phone, and you usually just don't do that. But I just enjoy talking to him. I mean, because he just got me stimulated in terms of, just life in general. It wasn't just a hobby, and so we had a great relationship. And so after that, I just, I started making other relationships and with various people, and I saw back then I saw the community. And I enjoyed that aspect of it, and I felt like I had something to offer because I was very versed in the media. I mean, I knew how to buy media, I knew how to promote, and I knew the athletes and the corporate people. So I had this feeling of understanding the situation, and I felt like I could make a contribution, and so we just kept going. And so that's how I got involved in it, and again, as of today, I still
hold on. I'm gonna stop you right there because Leighton is in. I want to bring Leighton up, and he's on a tight schedule tonight. So hold your thought though. I think I picked a good spot to break in. So let's bring Leighton on. Leighton's in a new environment again. Leighton, welcome. This is the Vintage Spotlight. Leighton Sheldon of Just Collect. And Leighton, I just want to, before you even say it, I just want to say I really enjoyed Trading Card Therapy episode number 46. I listened to that yesterday. Really great episode. But welcome to the show. Ray, say hello to each other, fellas.
Hey, Ray, how are you today?
Yeah, Leighton, Jeremy, Leighton is one of the few people that you have to introduce. You just say Leighton. Everybody knows Leighton.
That's right.
He's got such a great reputation out there. But no, it's great to see you again.
Good to see you as well, Ray.
Good stuff. So Leighton, I know that you're on a bit of a tighter schedule tonight. But I do want to, first of all, say thanks for taking the time. Thanks for coming on, everybody. Follow Leighton, Leighton_Sheldon, Just_Collect, his podcast, Trading Card Therapy. Now, I had an idea of some things I wanted to talk about with you tonight, but as I do, I want to give you a chance to ask Ray a question. I want to give Ray a chance to ask you a question. So why don't we start with you, Ray? What sort of question do you have, or what kind of idea would you like to bounce around with Leighton tonight?
Well, one of the things that struck me, and it's a few years ago, I don't know if you remember this, Leighton, but I know you as being vintage and doing what you do, but you were really talking to me about kids, and I just want to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on kids. Even though you're in a totally different category, you still have the frame of mind to kind of understand that the kids are real important to the hobby.
Yeah, listen, it's a great question, Ray. And, it's interesting. I was trying to arrange a play date with one of my son's classmates recently. And the woman happens to be the class mom of my son's class, who is in third grade. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I was talking about doing a play date at my store, Just Collect in Millburn. And I said, I don't know if your son collects Pokemon or sports cards, but we can, meet here and take him to the park after. And she said, I think that would be great. My son's really into Pokemon. She said, by the way, do you happen to know or have heard about the dad at last year's end of the school year picnic that was giving out baseball cards and Pokemon? Because apparently it was the biggest hit. Now, it turned out it was me. And even though I was flattered that she didn't realize she was talking about me, Ray, it gives me a lot of hope for what's going on. I mean, listen, my son's young, so I remember collecting cards at that age. The fact that kids care about what's going on with baseball cards, they care about what's going on with Pokemon, and even if it's not the same as you and I did, right? Like we fill up our 9-pocket sheets, everything changes, right? We grow and mature. But make no mistake, I think that the kids are interested. I think it's a little bit different from when we were kids, right? Maybe it was a little bit more Pogs and sports cards versus Pokemon and sports cards. But I do think it's very healthy what I'm seeing, and I'm really excited about the future.
Well, I knew that you were really, authentic about this, because I don't know if you remember this, but a couple of years ago you sent my son a starter kit.
I do remember.
And it had a number of cards in there, and it was kind of like some explanations, and he actually really spent the time to look at it and try to figure out if that's something that he was interested in. But I've always said that, and he really appreciated it. I always said that Leighton gets it, you know, and I know that I know even though with all the top load business you have, I know kids are so important to you.
Oh, very much so. I mean, listen, you know, my son's 8, and I feel like I see his little classmates running around, and I just think it's really great for the hobby to see such young, you know, kids interested in a variety of different aspects, whether it be sports, Pokemon, or other.
Yeah. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. Keeping the kids, you know, I like these, you know, you were giving them out at a birthday party, Leighton, and I always tell people, always say, what can we do with all of our base cards that nobody wants? Put them in team bags of 10 and give them out on Halloween. It's a real nice thing to do. You might become the most popular house in your neighborhood if you go ahead and do that. I've been doing it for 15 years now or so, and I get people coming back year over year. It's funny when they say, "Oh, can I have one for my dad too?" I'm like, "Of course you can. Yeah, sure. Here's a few. I've always got extras." Leighton, did you have anything that you wanted to run by Ray tonight?
I do. It actually happens to be something I mentioned, you know, yesterday, or excuse me, a few days ago on Trading Card Therapy. And so, Ray, I'm curious if you feel that if we figured out a way to take something as big as, for example, the National, you know, the big sports convention that we have every year in our hobby, if we figured out a way with that convention and a few of the other big conventions to take some of that data of the cards that are being sold and transacted at these particular big conventions like the National, if we figured out a way to incorporate that, whether it be like into Card Ladder, Sports Card Investor, or vintage card prices, do you think it would help the hobby if we could work with some of these third-party, you know, data, you know, pricing services to get some of the in-person transactions happening in the conventions onto the platforms, therefore basically increasing the amount of data and knowledge that all of the collectors, dealers, and investors would have to work with when it comes to buying and selling cards?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a great point, because if you remember, like when we had 400,000 square feet, you know, it was sold out basically. And a lot of the newer companies and the little new tech-oriented companies couldn't get into the show. When we expanded to 600,000 square feet in Chicago, you saw a lot of new companies come in. They were able to kind of showcase their their technology, their vision, and so what we saw was, and matter of fact, we just talked about this in our meeting in Cleveland Monday and Tuesday, is that we want to get more of that tech knowledge and more of that information database. And I'm a real big database guy. I just think it's so important because it tells a story, and apply it to what you just said too. So to answer your question, and I bring this up to anybody who's out there. If you want to get involved in it, or if you have ideas or thoughts, we're wide open. We'd love to hear it, and we feel like that's an important issue and something we want to address going forward.
I think it's also important, Leighton, because a lot of the data out there is based on online auction platforms and maybe some fixed price listing platforms as well, which is valuable data. And you mentioned Card Ladder, you said Sports Card Investor. Their service is called Market Movers. You've got Vintage Card Prices. 130 Point provides some information, but also I do know Card Ladder does offer a private sales, the opportunity to send them in your private sales information.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they do. They will verify it, is my understanding. And they also want to attach a name to it just to make sure that it, for real transparency, which I think is a great piece to the puzzle that they've implemented. Now, I don't know how many people are sending in that data. And I think what you're getting at, Leighton, is a more comprehensive collection of this data by maybe, I think you said it on your podcast, verified dealers might be a way to do it. Like who is going to be trust, and it's always hard to say who's going to be trusted because it seems like it's tough to put trust out there these days. We've seen some people who we thought we could trust go sideways lately, but in any event, I think that the initiative, the idea is a good one. It just needs to be, I think Card Ladder's figured out how to do it. Now you have to figure out how to scale it and get people to buy in. And, even Dan's Vintage says right here, some of the dealers don't want a record of their sales for tax purposes. Well, that right? I think that's just reality, but maybe it would have to be anonymous to an extent or by username, so that there isn't a a way to, for privacy purposes more than anything, which might tie into the taxation piece. So anything you want to add to that, or were you thinking along those lines?
Well, I just think that it's a issue, opportunity that needs to be looked at, and it needs to be delved into and thought out. And as we're having this discussion right now, I think this can be like taken into another level and come back with those answers. But we have the technology now. We have the opportunity, the companies, the new companies that are coming into the play, that I think it's worth, and we should, as hobbyists, want to know the direction. There's so many people right now that are saying too, like and I'm one of those people. We just scratched the surface in terms of the collectible industry. In terms of the sports marketing, the sports memorabilia and trading cards. I really think there's such a huge upside to it. But maybe that data will convince more people that that's what we need to do and what we need to know.
Yeah, Leighton.
I agree with you, Ray. I'd like to say it on here now that I'm going to reach out to Joe Drellick and the team for the December Philadelphia show that's going to take place. It's called thephillyshow.com. It's going to take place in December, and what I'm going to ask Joe, even if it's just me, which I'm hoping is going to have a few other people as well, actually, Ray and Jeremy, it's not just about what I sell, but I was buying so much at the Philly show. I'm like, I cannot believe that none of these transactions are being recorded anywhere. And listen, some of them, of course, are more expensive than others, but ultimately, I do believe this, and you said this, Ray, we're just scratching the surface, but in order to build a foundation that we're going to be able to continue to build on top of, to be proud of, to share, and believe that it's going to be here 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future, we need transparency, and we need the data that's already happening to be available to everyone. That's all we're talking about. So yes, it is some technology, of course, that will take to log this data to make sure it's available to everyone. But I think it's really just, about getting the ball started, whether it be it's one dealer, several dealers, and then you talk about in the future having a program where maybe people have to be certified to participate. But as far as the taxes, I just want to address that. I mean, listen, everyone is entitled to do what they want to do, but I think most of the people that I do business with are doing business above board, and I don't think that will be an issue. I think they want to see their data out there, and they want to help everyone be more confident as a buyer, as a seller. So
yeah.
Right. And just one more thing. I mean, and I've noticed this over the last couple of years. I mean, and I'll just speak to the national, but we've got so many more international people coming in. I can tell you, I mean, I organized a group from London, 50 people just came in for the show and took off. I mean, and I know people are coming in from more and more countries. I know that because they call me, and also because I can see that in social media too. I would like to know how much money is being brought in from the international group, not from investor, but more from a buying perspective. And I don't know if there's a way of tracking that or looking at that, but I've got to think it's growing, and it's growing fast.
For sure. I just want to address a couple of comments, Leighton. I will let you give me one more minute of your time, and then we'll let you go. But Rich Klein, who used to go around to shows as a staffer for Beckett collecting pricing data, he says here, as a person who actually went to shows back in the day to gather prices, it sounds great, but it was even then a bit difficult to truly monitor. Some dealers happily showed me their sales. Others, you had to be very circumspect to get that information. We spent $90,000 in travel. It was a major part of not only getting that in-person information, but also getting relationships with people one could trust. And I think that as difficult as it was back then in the 80s for the Beckett staff to go do that, they did a very good job considering those limitations. And today, I mean, there was no internet in the 80s. Then the hobby was a whole different thing back in the 80s. It wasn't as much of a market. It was a marketplace. I understand that, but the values just weren't what they are today. So there's a more of an desire, I would say, to get that data out there for a lot of people. So I think it would be a different landscape today than it was in the 80s for Beckett and the price data gatherers. And maybe you're onto something, Leighton, with your hot take from episode 46 of Trading Card Therapy that dropped yesterday or the day before on your podcast. So, well, listen, I know you got to run. So I just want to thanks for taking the time tonight coming on. Follow Leighton _Sheldon on Instagram and _Just collect, and listen to his podcast. You guys, Trading Card Therapy. It's funny because you can watch it on YouTube and then you can watch it on Instagram and realize that he's on a green screen the whole time on YouTube.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy. It was great seeing you, Ray.
Same here, Leighton. Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Take care, Leighton. Thank you. All right, Ray. Let's before we pick up where we left off, a couple more comments. Piccolina the cat. Hello from Bonsoir from Montreal. Welcome to the show. Kamikaze Sports Cards needs a sports card therapist. It looks like. Check out the Sports Card Therapist podcast. Kamikaze. Jeffrey Hart. Good to see you. House of Jordan says if Ray works for the Expos, they'd still be in Montreal. That would be some wish. Oh, sorry, right there. That'd be some wishful thinking. Mark Santucci, better late than never. Welcome to the show. Leighton's gone, but Stukes found a video of him 12 years ago ripping an exhibit card cello pack. Wow, very, very neat. I haven't seen that, but boy, would I like to see that. What does Colin say? I had to record sold items and bought items when I returned from the Philly show last year, driving back to Canada. Had a great talk with Leighton there. Very good, Colin. Welcome to the show. As always, Dan, kudos to Rich Klein. You guys were groundbreakers. We owe you guys so much for that data. I mean, that magazine was what we all looked forward to back then. I definitely think that's the way it is for so many of us. Mark says no internet and no one touches. We had screw downs in the 80s. No doubt about that. Daniel, welcome to the show. So, Ray, let's pick up where we left off. And I believe we were talking about, you didn't have a contract with the National. Mike Burkus he just assumed you were going to come back. So you came back. I mean, if you could just tell us a little bit about, how did you see the National evolve from, and I said at the beginning of the show, 2013. I always have 2013 Cleveland in my mind, but it was 2010 Baltimore that you started. Mm-hmm. So how did you see the National evolve from 2010 Baltimore through until 2023 Chicago? And then we can talk about what's coming in the future.
Well, again, Mike was the inspiration back then, and I'll never forget, and maybe some people may remember the National when we had kids under 12 get in free on Sundays, and just Sundays, and it was Mike who had the conversation, because I was part of it, and he goes, "Why are we just doing Sundays? Let's do it every day," and so. It was, and when Mike said something, there wasn't really any question, or there was. I mean, if Mike felt passionate about it, Mike got it done, and so I mean, I credit Mike for the kickoff of, let's say, how we look at bringing kids into the hobby, because back then that's all everybody talked about. I mean, 100% was bringing kids into the hobby. And Mike was sensitive to that and felt like, the one thing about Mike is that he'd listen to you. Even if he disagreed with you, he'd let you play it out. And then he'd give you his reason and why it should or shouldn't be. But, with the kids, under 12 getting in, or 12 and under getting in free, he just saw that as we had to do it. And so it was done. And then, as we move forward, it was all about, how do we make this experience a better experience for the attendees first, and then the exhibitors. And so he knew every exhibitor, and he knew everything that was going on. So for me, it was a great time because, not that I learned an awful lot, but I was very, very inspired. And having Mike there was really the reason I came back, and and he respected me enough to let me do what I thought was necessary, and then if he could help out, it was absolute. I mean, even to the point where I said to him at one time, "Hey, Mike," I said, we got to catch up with the times. We need to be on Instagram," and John Brogy was doing Facebook, and Junior was doing Twitter, and there was no Instagram. So he said to me, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, you got to be on Instagram." And he goes, all right, go for it. He said, just do it. And so I did it. I mean, I didn't even question him. I just did it because, he asked me to. And so going forward, it was all about, the relationships. I wish Mike was around today because there's so many things that I know he would be, be so involved in, and to see what he's created, to be proud of. A lot of the inspiration, and not only from the staff, but from even the exhibitors and the board of directors. I mean, Mike was the leader, and so it was difficult after he passed, and so, but at the same time, the hobby was evolving, and there were more and more new creative ideas, new concepts. I got more involved with knowing a lot of them, and me being from a packaged goods background, I love the idea of kind of creating something and nurturing it and then seeing it thrive. And so I found myself just working, on behalf of the National, really. I mean, just my ideas, just working and talking to, corporate people or whoever, and just trying to say, hey, hey, this is a good idea. And I did it with the understanding that, hey, it's going to help the National too. And so if you give guidance to that, and going back to my league days, understanding how, sometimes, you've got it planned out that you're doing an event, but, maybe you don't get going in terms of planning it exactly on site, when it's too late, maybe just a few weeks in advance. But I've always talked to them about, hey, if you have an opportunity like this, then let's do it, do it right and create something that is going to, maximize your existence, your participation. And so I always enjoyed that, and, work with the athletes too, and TriStar, and, things that I like to pull off with the mainstream media, promotions, interactions. Honestly, it got me to a point where I was meeting a lot of interesting people, and that fascinated me, stimulated me, and I got to partake in something that people could walk away from and say, hey, I had a great experience, or I made a lot of money, or I did all the above. And so for me, that was so important, and I kept doing it. And even today, today's a little different because we have new management, and with that, I've gotten much more responsibility and opportunity to really kind of do what I enjoy, and that's think outside the box. I've worked with a lot of influencers, got great relationships with a lot of influencers. Some of them are really fantastic to work with. I say most of them, all of them really. And there's all different levels, in terms of influencers and up and coming people who I don't really call them influencers, but I call them ambassadors, and they're at a stage where they're growing and learning and trying to kind of figure out the landscape. And so like when you say up to like today, a couple of years ago, we got working with the manufacturers, the trading card manufacturers, and obviously they were really good about creating product and creating situations, experiences in their booths for the kids. And then Brody the kid came along, and I got the opportunity to talk to him, and I said, would you be interested in shadowing me and doing some stuff and representing kids and talking to kids and finding out what kids want. And so he jumped at it, and he said, absolutely. And so Brody was the first one who got involved, and he's been with us for a number of years now. But it got me thinking, as Brody grew, as Brody contributed, there's much more content out there, much more content. I mean, I remember years ago, I was begging for people to create content. And now everybody is creating content, which is a great thing. Don't get me wrong. I love it. And so for me, I had an opportunity to say, you know what, let's try this. And I kicked it off with Dr. Collectible. I met him at the Mint, and God knows why, but I just said, listen, you got to do this. Got to do this with us. And he jumped at it. He got it. He recognized it right away. And then I went ahead and picked out certain people that I felt represented certain areas of the hobby, and we kind of collaborated in terms of, hey, we're sort of a team here, and the object is to create as much pre-show content and on-site content to showcase the hobby. Really, that's what it came down to. It wasn't so much the national, because the national, I mean, it wasn't as if we had to sell tickets, and it wasn't as if we had to sell exhibitor booths. What we did have to sell is the hobby. And so they all agreed. They all got it. They understood. And so there's a list of about 10 of them. But I enjoy putting that together, Jeremy. I enjoy putting situations together that can be looked at and taken to another level. And I think, if nothing else, if they don't even participate next year, they had a good experience themselves. I mean, they learned an awful lot. They were in situations where they saw how we acted, and we saw how we presented ourselves, and a lot of time was spontaneous, and a lot of times was planned. But it was something where I was excited in our meetings on Monday and Tuesday in Cleveland that we're gonna do bigger and better in Cleveland next year.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. You mentioned Bro to the Kid, so a bit of a pioneer in the ambassadorship role as far as sports cards go and the national goes. And I do want to talk about growing the hobby. That's what I titled this episode as. And I mean, you've been talking about it, but sort of in a roundabout sort of way, just based on your own experience. Dave Marino put a question in the chat here. He says, what were some community engagements from years past you would love to see brought back and reintroduced? So you said that, you're creative. You like to think outside the box. Let's think outside of the box, or let's think about a box from earlier back maybe in the early 2010s. Was there anything that was going on that you think could, just to answer his question, it could be reintroduced now that maybe faded away, or have we evolved? I mean, that might be the simple answer might be that, well, we've evolved. We have new things now, but I'll give you a chance to address that. Does anything even come to mind?
Well, one thing comes to mind right away, and this is years ago, and it was at one of the Chicago shows, but I actually planned on this. We created an auction, the national auction, and the whole purpose of it was to really, at that time, there was a lot of rumblings about trading card people being greedy, and it's all I think about is money, 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 and sell. And so I got the idea of let's put it out there that we meaning the hobby, meaning the national, are actually people that are passionate and sympathetic and want to do stuff for like the underprivileged. So we created an auction that we did the first 2 years. I think I did with Handbid, which was a private company, and this last 2 years with Pristine Auction, and they've done a good job. But when we first started, it was Ronald McDonald House in Chicago. And what that did, and maybe a lot of your viewers don't realize that, what that did is it resonated throughout the community. The media picked up on it, and the goodwill that it brought out. But I did it really so that not only, it's not so much that the Nationals giving back, it's more like I position it that the exhibitors are giving back. And I said to them, this is our group that wants to give back to the community. And I think we raised like $20,000 or $30,000 for Ronald McDonald House, and we've been doing that going forward. But it gives us an opportunity to kind of give back to the community. And then we got guys that are doing stuff, bringing people in, and bringing the less fortunate into the show. And we as a we need to do maybe more of a better structured job of it, and we will. But Mr. Devine has brought in underprivileged kids from Chicago, and then brought all his buddies and giveaways and all that kind of stuff. And so it's been good. We can do much better though. Don't get me wrong, but the community is important, and I think it helps. Like when we go back to Chicago, we may have some different ideas or different kind of mindset in terms of what we're going to do in the community.
Right. Okay, good. I want to just go back to the ambassadors for a second. And in terms of growing the national, do you feel after the first, you had Brody for a couple of years, but you really expanded the program this past year. Did you see a return on that initiative? Do you feel that they had a direct impact on the attendance, maybe the money spent at the show, to the vendors' benefit, to the show's benefit? Speak to that a bit.
Well, I tell you honestly, my purpose was to create as much content as we can. But having said that, I also wanted to hit every target, every demographic. And by creating this ambassador program, I feel like we were able to address that. And, in other words, I could go to every ambassador. For me, in my mind, there was a reason for them being part of this. And I talked to them about it, and they agreed. And so it was more like, all right, I want you to target this. I want you to target that. We've got this going on. I'd like you there, and somebody else over, maybe talking to an athlete. And this is what I wanted. And I was really just guiding them. I wasn't mandating it, but I was guiding them in terms of, this is what I'd like to get out of it. And not only for me, but for them too, because most of the people that I chose are very young. And so I was hoping that with some guidance, it would help them, help themselves. So, and I thought, it was a learning experience for me too. But after the show was finished and I had individual conversations with everybody, I mean, for me, it worked. I mean, it really did work. And now, again, every time you do something, you learn from it. And now for me going back, I've got some other things that we want to target, but when you're in a position like mine, you're kind of fair game for everybody, and everybody has an opinion of what should be done, what shouldn't be done, and so you just try to be in a position where you present all sides of it. And I was extremely happy with the way they went about it, the amount of time they put into it, how it was perceived, and I never said to them, you can't create your own content. I always said to them, I want you to create your own content. If one story or one post out of 3 or out of 5 is with the national and it's meaningful, that's great. And so, I gave them that freedom, and I also was in a position where I could tell them of certain things that were happening that nobody else knew about. And so they were excited about that, where like when we had Derek Jeter come in, nobody knew Derek Jeter was coming into the show floor except me and Arena and Bleecker. But that was about it. But my ambassadors were there. And my ambassadors were there, and they got to see, Derek come in, drove him around. This is before the exhibitors got in on a Thursday morning. But, the whole idea was to take Jeter and give him a tour of the floor and then take him to the arena booth. He'd get there, and then people who are like exhibitors who were on site at the time at 8 o'clock in the morning, they would be able to, get a picture taken with him. He'd have lunch later with some of their key clients, but that was something we set up, and the ambassadors got to follow him and got a lot of great content. A lot of them got to interview him, whether it's 30 seconds or whatever, but they did it. And then there was other with athletes and people that were like VIPs, but that was the upside for them. and they were go-to, so it was great. And so I think all of them expressed interest in coming back, so I'm glad about that.
Good. Couple comments. Orlando says a young ambassador, Ryan Nolan, went to 52 card shows in the year. Best national recap video. And Ryan is a young guy, and he also breakout sports cards. And he is, for a young guy, loves his early vintage stuff. Darren, this is really cool to hear. Caught up on some episodes of mine while on his drive from Wisconsin to Cincinnati. Hey, that's cool to hear as always, Darren. Glad to see you here. Vintage Card Collector has a question, Ray. Do you think the National will ever change the system for selecting tables and move away from a seniority system? And I mean, I don't know if this is even your department or anything that you're a part of, but can you speak to it?
Yeah, I don't think you want to go on my answer because I don't. I mean, I know it in a way, but you've got to think about it. And this is from my own experience doing shows with the leagues. It's hard when somebody's been there and supporting you for many years to turn around and say you don't have seniority. And even though, today's today and tomorrow's tomorrow, I don't know if that will ever change, but I do know that with Joe and Jimmy and Brian being in the new management team, I do know that they've got a little different perspective and they're open for ideas and I'm gonna learn just like you do in terms of what that may be, but they are really, really, truly about transparency. And there's a lot of things that you'll see and hopefully be excited about just like I will going forward.
All right, good stuff. Mookie Chilson puts up basically my next question. He says, Ray, what do you have cooking for Cleveland next year? Any preview, anything you can share with us that might be, newsworthy, breaking news, anything at all?
Well, Cleveland has always been a great market. I've done 2 shows there and with a lot of success. And going forward, again, transitioning from the old to the new, and also to the way trade nights have taken off. I think in Chicago, what I was told is, and I was there at the show, so I mean at the trade night, so I saw it. We had almost 5,000 to 6,000 people go through trade night, and I say that on a rotating basis. In other words, people leave, and then there was a line to get in the whole time. So we know that's something that is very timely and very the people are passionate about it. There's no question about it. We started with conversations in Cleveland this past week about, all right, well, how do we take it to another level? So again, this is all just conversation, but we're talking about maybe having 2 or 3 trade nights in the convention center. Maybe Wednesday or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Wednesday, whatever. But we're talking about that. We're talking about having maybe a load-in party. So we figure that with everybody that was so excited about the trade night on Thursday night and for the first time, Jeremy, I've never seen this before, but the first time there are kids and adults that were in the lobby of our show trading as well, and never saw that before. I mean, obviously you see them in the hotels and all that, but we want to kind of take that experience and just when the show closes, you'll be able to go into a trade night. We're going to have more discussions on that. We're for that, and we're going to fine tune it, and we'll have details soon.
All right. Well, look forward to hearing and learning more about what's coming up next year in Cleveland. Let's talk a bit about, and just maybe we can keep this one quick, but you were involved last year at the Beckett Industry Summit in Las Vegas, and that would be happening maybe this weekend or next weekend if it was happening again, but it doesn't seem to be occurring. What do you know about that event? Was it canceled altogether? Is it on hiatus? What do you know about the Beckett Industry Summit and the current status of it?
Well, I was very honored to be asked, say about 6 years ago, to come on board and be co-host, and with the last couple of years with Ted Barker. And when Ted left, we had a really successful industry summit last year in Las Vegas, and then but when Ted left, I kind of it was in one of those things where with Beckett there was some internal movement and uncertainty, and so Ted just said, hey, listen, I'm finished, I'm retired. And I honestly, as much as I enjoyed working there, most of it was because of Ted and Alex, who worked with us, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. But going forward, nobody's notified me whether there is or is not. I've heard it on a third party that it's been canceled and they've restructured it to sponsor weekend or something like that. But it's too bad. It's unfortunate because I think it really provided the industry with that opportunity. And what I've always said was that, and this was not necessarily for the buyers and sellers. This is mostly for like the corporate, the mom and pop, the brick and mortar, the online, more of the the movers and the leadership of the hobby. And it was good because it was a place you can come. You can't do that really at the National. You really can't. I mean, there's so many things going on, and you get distracted. But at the industry summit, you're coming for that main purpose, is to kind of interact and kind of get a feel for what's going on in the industry. So one, you can feel comfortable that you're going in the right direction, or two, get some heads up on some ideas that you can help do some elevating of your programs that you conduct, whether it's in the shop or on the line or whatever like that. But yeah, it's from a hobby's perspective, I'm kind of sad that they haven't decided they're going to do that. And I know with the Mint too, I haven't heard anything about that. But it's as we've spoken before, Jeremy. The hobby is transitioning. The hobby is evolving, and a lot of stuff that we normally wouldn't think about, we've got to think about. It's in the old days you just thought about waking up and business as usual. You can't think that way anymore. You've got to be on your toes, and you always got to be thinking ahead. That's why the industry summit is so important.
Yeah, I mean, the industry summit was the one that I was at physically, not virtually. It was all about growing the hobby. That's what the whole thing seemed to be for. And now that it's no longer there, or it doesn't seem like it's gonna. I shouldn't say it's not happening this year anyway. Does that open the door for Fanatics to come in and maybe do something with that? And let's talk about Fanatics for a moment, and Fanatics events, the new business that they're starting. And
right.
In the spirit of growing the hobby, and also how Fanatics events will coexist with the National and other major regional shows. How do you see Fanatics fitting into the landscape of both shows and corporate type summit industry events?
Sure. I just want to back up for a quick second. And I just want this on record that I just think it's irresponsible of Beckett not to come out and give direction in terms of what's happening. Because there's so many people that count on this, and I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten in terms of Ray, is something going on? Why? Because we got to plan it, and we've got to plan accordingly. And Beckett hasn't come out and said anything to anybody. That's just purely irresponsible, and I'll leave it like that. Getting into what we're talking about, the evolution and the transition. So many people come up to me and ask me, what's competition? And I in my opinion, I'll respond by saying, listen, there are so many local card shows, so many regional card shows popping up almost every week, right? And when you're talking about the National, we had over 100,000 people. We had almost like 50 to 75 exhibitors that were on the waiting list to get in, and that's 600,000 square feet. You tell me, why would we consider that competition? That's not competition. Understand that's growth. Start talking about growth, not competition. And when I go out to Rob Veras' show in Anaheim, I've gone to Union, I've gone to, I go to all this, as many shows. I've gone to Dallas show. I go to many shows I can. Why? Toronto. I go all these shows because, I'm representing the national. And I want these people to understand that we're here for you, not against you. And I don't want this being antagonized or any kind of comments. I know there's some guys online who are talking about, well, there's competition and this and that. What we said earlier today, we said that we're at only a fraction of where we should be in terms of growth of the hobby of sports member. I think collectibles is like $400 billion. The sports memorabilia is like maybe $2 to $8 billion. We're not even close to where we should be or could be. So I don't look at that as competition. Now, as it relates to Fanatics, we've always had a great relationship with Fanatics, Tops, Zero, just great people. I mean, I know a lot of those people. They're my friends. And we've conversed for years and years and years. It's not competition. And they know that. They know that I tell them that it's not competition. I tell anybody it's not competition. What Fanatics can do, and they're very smart. They brought in Lance, who's from Comic-Con. But what they're going to do, they're going to take a route that's going to, kind of grow the hobby. The national is the national. It'll always be the national. But when we talk to Fanatics, and I think they feel the same way, that we need to work together. We want to work together. And you'll see, I mean, Fanatics and Tops, well, they'll be in Cleveland. They'll be doing their stuff. I think they had a very successful show in Chicago. Why would you want to take that away? I mean, they can do and they can be as successful as they want, doing what they want to do without having to, think about, whatever at the national. And me and our team, our whole team, is pro Fanatics and pro Tops in terms of, we know they're going to do shows. They haven't decided timing-wise, or they have. It's internal or locations. But that's not competition. That's growth. And that's the way, we look at it. And there's going to be people up there who want to stir the pot, but it's crazy. It's just crazy. We get along great with them. And I told our team in Cleveland, I said, you know what, I know a lot of their social media people. I know a lot of. I want to do more. I want to do more with them. And seeing what they did last year was fantastic. The way they managed their booth and the way they brought players and VIPs to their booth, that was awesome. And the trade night, they were, all the management was there at trade night. It was awesome. It was great. So there's a lot of things that we will do together. So yeah, it's growth, not competition.
The soundbite that we're going to 10x the hobby, it's taken on a life of its own in recent months. Well, since Fanatics, I guess Michael Rubin first was documented saying that. And what do you think is reasonable? Do you think that 10xing the hobby, whether that's by dollar volume or by transactional volume or by the number of participants in the hobby, do you think that that's a reasonable expectation for the hobby to have right now? And if so, how do you think that we're going to accomplish that?
Well, let me first say that Michael Rubin is a very smart guy, and he's a very good a very great businessman. But what he's doing now is he's coming into a category, and he has the wherewithal to know who to hire and what direction to go. What he is learning, though, he's learning about the community. He's learning about what we know as the hobby, and because he's never had that experience before. So for me personally, I see him, going out there, making, checks on whether it's going to a show or a brick and mortar, and he's getting that experience. I saw him act and react at the National. He seemed so much more comfortable. in terms of dealing with people and going up to people and knowing people. And so I think it's just a period of time where he's just getting acclimated to what we know as the community. And as of the community, that's what we're looking for. We want him to do that. So as long as he do that, Michael Mahan is very active, and once you start learning that, it's kind of, it just gets you, and you spend more and more time on it. So I don't know what to expect from him, but I do know that he's going to do it based on his experiences and basically how it works best for his company.
Well, I had to take my little son to the toy store in the mall today, and I walked by a lid store, and there were the Mitchell and Ness collaboration with the lids, with the baseball caps and the packs on the side, and get a pack of Topps Chrome with the purchase of a baseball cap. So it's happening. It's starting to happen more mainstream. Couple comments here. Perk says, do either of you have any concerns that after Cleveland, the next 3 Nationals will all be in Chicago? I'll go first, Ray. I have no concern. I like it like that for myself. I like that venue. I like that. I like Rosemont for the show quite a bit, actually. So I was happy to hear that. But how about you, Ray? I'm just one kid up here in Canada that's saying that.
Well, from a marketing perspective and promotion perspective, it's much better for me, because I get to deal with people in the mainstream media, and I get to deal with the community up there, knowing that we're coming back every year. So we'll be able to do bigger and better things, because that, it's always been challenging for me when I say, well, yeah, this week we're going to be in Chicago, next week in Cleveland, then Atlantic City. We'll be back in 3 years. Now, they know we can create something that's ongoing. So that's a huge positive. And the feedback we get and the relationship we have with Rosemont and the convention center is just unbelievable. Again, I've worked with maybe over 25 different venues throughout the country. Most of them, with the exception of just maybe 1 or 2 major ones that I haven't. And these people are just fantastic to work with. I will drop some news. The Donald D. Convention Center, Rosemont Village, has approved new air conditioning and heating units that will go on top of the convention center. I think there are going to be 11 of them, and I think they're just putting them up this month or next month. So you're going to have all brand new air conditioning for when we go back there.
And the hobby goes wild. That's great news. That's good to hear. Good to hear. And hopefully they keep the overhead doors closed those next 3 years as well. All right, let's go to a couple more comments coming in here. Mark Santucci wants to know, and I feel like I know the answer to this, but let's get because you've been to all these shows. So Ray, if the National is the biggest show, what's the second biggest show? Is it Burbank? Is it the Toronto Expo, the East Coast National, or something else? And you've been to all these shows. So what's second biggest to the National?
Yeah, I have to say Toronto's up there. I would say Toronto. I think Rob in Anaheim, he had like 180,000 square feet. But
Toronto's over 200, I think.
Yeah, but it again, it depends on who you draw and the exhibitors but no, I think Toronto. But you know what? All the other shows, even Philly and East Coast, and they're all really, really good shows. There's solid shows, and when I hear about all the shows, whether it's in it's in Columbus, Ohio, or it's in Tampa Bay, or wherever, Milwaukee, and they're popping up, but they're doing really well, and so that's a good sign for us in the hobby. But I don't think it's important, to say who's biggest and who's not. Let the show. All of them have their own personality, their own draw and reason for being, and I like that. I like that diversity. But don't get big just for the sake of getting big. That's when you can get into trouble, in terms of from a business standpoint, and trying to be the National. you don't want to be the national because, again, we go back to all the what I call the check boxes, where you have to have so many things in play to be able to move an event of that size. And a good example is like, people say, well, how about Anaheim? And, the checkbox there is that, well, Rob can get that, he can get that within a few months. He can make that commitment and get them to sign off of it. We can't do that. They won't give it in 18 months, so we need 3 years, to be able to get a confirmation on that. And not too many venues are willing to do that because for the purpose of, at that point, they'd rather get a pharmaceutical or a tech company because it's going to bring in more money and more rooms and better for the city. So
that's like Odd Merchants here says St. Louis, Kansas, Minnesota, Minneapolis would all be better locations than Cleveland, but they're just simply not options. And you can go back and watch the episode we did 6 weeks ago with the new management team. They spoke exactly to why all these cities that everyone always puts out there is we'd like to have it here. They're just not doable for various reasons.
And let me just finish by saying this. I mean, this group that's in there now, and I asked them to do this, and they're totally on board with this. But they will make sure every market is checked off, and and looking at venues and what I'm going to create actually is a checklist, a box list. And check off every box. I mean, maybe 25 boxes. Maybe a venue hits 20, and that's okay, or it needs to hit 23, or some of the critical boxes need to be checked, and they can't check them, so that prevents us from doing it. But there's not going to be any question. If there's something in St. Louis that can give us 400,000 plus, and in Cleveland, I think we got 425,000. Square feet. But if there's a venue anywhere that gives it 400,000 square feet, can give us some of the benefits union-wise, and give us enough hotel rooms, and by the airport, and all these that from a box standpoint, if they can do that, then you'll know about it and then vote on. But it's just very, very, very difficult to get to that point.
All right, some more comments. Duke says Dallas is up there in my opinion. Yeah, Dallas has done I've never been. I want to go, but Dallas has done. Kyle and I've met Kyle. Done a great job. There's so many great regional shows outside of the national. Dallas definitely being one of them. Colin says it should be in Chicago every year. 100 plus dealers aren't in Cleveland that were in Chicago this year, and yeah, that's going to happen. Colin says Toronto is hands down the second biggest show, which is my understanding as well. Vintage Card Collector from an earlier discussion says a lack of communication is par for the course for Beckett. It's questionable if they even have a communications department. And it's just sad that that's the sentiment out there right now. It's sad for the brand that we all grew up loving and is a staple in our hobby. So it's just sad to hear a comment like that I know Vintage Card Collector is not the only one who feels that way. Mookie Chilson said, Ray, a very healthy attitude about competition and correct in my opinion. You're welcome at the Garfield, New Jersey show anytime, and he will pay the $2 cover. Joe Perot, good evening and welcome to the show. Good to see you. Okay.
Well, let me say one thing, just to respond to that too.
Sure.
I'll actually be running all the social media for the national going forward. It's going to be a transition. Right now I handle the Instagram, but I will be handling everything, and we're going to have a strategic plan and I want to be very engaging and all that. But I also set up a separate one called Collectible Media on Instagram, where the purpose was I can't promote the national on that all the time. So I created that so that with new shows popping up and new people, I want to collaborate with them. I want to promote them. So tag me, Collectible Media. And again, the reason why I do that is because the more we can present and promote all the stuff that's going on, all the shows, all the appearances, all the private signings, whatever, that's going to help the national, and so it's great for the hobby, and there's a way. Again, I don't have an agenda when it comes to promoting somebody out there. I'm going to promote everybody and anybody on collectible media. If you mention the national, I'll promote it on the national, but it's got to be a national related type of. Please send me that information, because I would, and to repost or post, or because I do think it's really helped in terms of, again, getting a perspective of what's going on out there, helps with promotions and all the above. So thank you.
I just added that account to the ticker. So all three of Ray's Instagram accounts, the national, his own Ray_Schulte, and Collectible Media, are now there for y'all to see. If you have Instagram and you'd like to follow, please go ahead and give Ray a follow on his various accounts. I think that'd be great. Okay, well, we've covered quite a bit. We haven't covered much about what you collect yourself. Why don't you just give us let me just see if we have any. Tell us a bit, Ray, about what you collect, what you like, what drives you. I see these movie posters behind you. Tell us about your own collection these days.
Well, during the 80s, when I was representing the players, I used to get a lot of what I call like tchotchkes and stuff, like bobbleheads and photos and trading cards and all that. And I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment in New York. And obviously, after a while, I just couldn't take in all this stuff. And it happened that one of my friends, Bobby Zarum, he's like one of the top PR guys in New York. He was responsible for I Love New York campaign and all that. He gave me a movie poster, a lobby card for my birthday. And I looked at it and I said, hey, thanks, Bobby, appreciate it. And this was at one of Gloria Rothstein's East Coast Nationals in White Plains. It's actually the venue that Jimmy Ryan has now. And Jimmy bought the show from Gloria. But anyway, to make a long story short, I got that. And he told me the story behind it. He told me the story about how movie posters were created, how they were distributed, and how they were returned to the movie houses. And so it's like anything else. And anytime I have a chance to have a conversation with somebody, it's not so much what it is, it's just the concept of collecting. And so for me, he basically said, this is like in 1901, 1902. And so he said, listen, back then, they'd create a movie, mostly soundless, and they would send out the movie and the movie poster, and when the theater was finished, they'd have to send the movie poster back. And so I started thinking about, well, that's cool. I mean, that's pretty interesting. And 1910, 1920, 1930, and so all these movies were out there, but it wasn't as if like today they have 1,000 or 10,000 movie posters for modern movies. And so when I saw this, I'm thinking, wow, that's cool. And to make a long story short, I basically said to myself, I said, listen, I want to collect just for the sake of collecting, because I just love collecting. And so I said, you know what, this is cool. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set some parameters, and I'm going to basically, start collecting movie posters. I knew there was a lobby card, a 1-sheet, 3-sheet, and all that. And so I said that to Bobby, and he hooked me up with one or two guys that were in that business and categories. And so, but I said the parameters are, it has to be pre-1960. It's got to be USA. It's got to be mint condition. It's got to be sports related. And, then there was 10 or other.
You're all about checking boxes, aren't you?
I was checking boxes, but you know what? That's what's so, if you really sit down with somebody talking about collecting, it's all about that. You really got to focus in on what you're looking at. It's the chase, it's the capture, and then it's the challenge to go out and do more. And so I started that, and so I sold a lot of stuff that I had. And I started collecting movie posters, but they had to be original. They had to be sports. And eventually, I at some point, I kind of, went outside the box and got some others that just fascinated me as I was a kid. But Yeah, I collect movie posters, original movie posters. I collect Type 1 photos, and that's it. I don't. I mean, I have a decent card collection, but it's not something I collect. It's nothing I chase after. And the autographs and all that went way back. You know, that was a long time ago.
Who are the Stukes wants to know, are those is that Babe and Lou Gehrig in the background behind you there? The busts?
Oh yeah. Those are two busts that I have. I think I mentioned to you I was really close to Julia Ruth Stevens, Babe's daughter, and so a lot of stuff that I do have is from her. And I never asked her for anything, but she lived here in Peoria for a number of years, and one of my best memories was taking her to the Diamondbacks game. You asked me if I was a Diamondbacks fan, and I said yes, and this is the reason why. When she was here, she was here for a number of years, but she was here in 2001, and the Yankees were coming down playing the World Series against the Diamondbacks in Bank One Ballpark. And I was friends with her way before that time, and she called me up. She goes, "Hey, Ray, are we going to the World Series?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, absolutely." And it was easy for me. I just called the Diamondbacks, and they took care of it. And it was funny because I'd go pick her up in Peoria, and we'd take the car drive down to the ballpark, and she's talking about Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, Daddy's Babe Ruth. And it's like, it was kind of surreal. But she was like a real influence on me. And this is the reason why when the Yankees and the Diamondbacks were slated to start the World Series, I got a lot of calls from New York media saying, can we talk to Julia? And I said, why? Well, we just want to get an idea, a feeling like why, or who is she rooting for? Is she rooting for her dad's team, the Yankees, or is she rooting for the Diamondbacks? And I said, well, that's a good question. I said, I'll call her up. And I called her up. I said, Fox News wants to do an interview with you. I don't know. They're going to ask you if you root for the Yankees or the Diamondbacks. They're going to put you in a tough position. And she, without hesitation, she goes, Ray, I am a Diamondbacks fan. and I said, you sure? You really? Are you? And she goes, absolutely. And I said, all right, now you have to explain yourself to me. And she goes, okay. She goes, well, I moved here years ago. She goes, and I followed the Diamondbacks all the time. Luis Gonzalez is my favorite player. You've taken me down there. We've met a lot of the team and this and that. She goes, I am a fan of the Arizona Diamondbacks. I said, but they're going to talk to you about Yankees, and why aren't you a Yankee fan? And I'm going to explain to them. She said, I'm going to explain to them that I am a baseball fan. And I am in the present, and my place is here, and I'm a hometown, fan. And so, and she stuck with that, and she just, it wasn't even a question, it wasn't a hesitation. I took her all 4 games. She stayed for every inning, stayed till the end. She answered any question, and it's funny because the media got it. They understood. There wasn't any negativity, to her rooting for the Diamondbacks. And it kind of sent a message out there, and it inspired me to obviously I grew up a Yankee fan. I'm Don Mattingly fan and Buck Showalter fan, but I'm living here in Arizona, so for the purpose of her spirit, I'm rooting for the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, right on. All right, well, that's really cool that you're pals with Babe. Is she still with us?
She passed away when she was 101 years old, a number of years ago.
Wow, that's really neat that you got to have a friendship with her and take in World Series games with her. Really cool. Before we wrap up, Ray, just want to get your kind of overall thoughts on, from your perspective, of course, just the state of the hobby right now, whether you want to talk about, what you're seeing, what the climate is like, are we on an upswing, and we talked earlier about growing the hobby and the whole 10xing thing and all that, but how do you feel the health of the hobby is right now and moving forward through the end of 2023?
Yeah, and again, another reason why I go to these shows is to trying to figure that out too. Just trying to get a feel, talk to a lot of people. But my feeling is the hobby's strong, and the community is strong, and I think we are going through a transition, in addition to evolving and growing. But I think for most of the people that I talk to, they're solid people, and they have the best interest, and that being the hobby. And so and I think if you look at it from the Nationals perspective, we are growing it to include. I mean, I saw this years ago, a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic. Chicago, we had a really strong Chicago show, and I saw a lot of families there. I saw mothers and daughters and grandmothers and grandfathers, and I saw that, and I saw we were strong. So the pandemic didn't really surprise me that much, because it wasn't that we were coming from weakness, we were coming from strength. And then after the pandemic, it just kind of, the rocket ship took off. And I think, where it falls, I still think it will be in a position where we can say that we're strong. And I see a lot of international, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm not talking about the big monies. I'm talking about just the average collector. Whether it's South Korea or Shanghai or Australia, wherever. I mean, the people are interested. Germany, we had the whole team from Paris, the Paris card show, come over, just to kind of. They wanted to participate in the show. I mean, they want to be part of it, and I think more and more people are doing that. But to answer your question, I think we have some solid people at the helm. Just like anything else, with Fanatics coming in, it's not so much that we need to be worried about it, but we just it's one of those unprecedented times where they're making inroads, and they're finding out, they're experiencing, and they're creating situations that they may even have thought of. But I think it's all for the good. I think we just got to stick to the road, be positive, and continue to just support our local shows, support our regional shows, and just be good people. I don't like it when I see people, the haters out there, or just people talking about just to be heard. I think everyone has situations where we just need to move forward, and everybody, I think most people have the right intentions. And so I'm excited about the hobby. I'm excited about what we meaning the National, are going to be doing, but I'm also excited about what Fanatics is going to be doing. I'm excited about people who are creating news, like you, Jeremy, and others that are out there and connecting people, and that's the most important thing, which I love about it, is the community, but it's connecting people, giving people a reason to understand each other and deal with each other, and kindred friendships and all that. So I'm very bullish on the hobby right now.
Well, good to hear from someone in your position and from your perspective. So, well, let's wrap this up, Ray. Thanks so much for this time, the storytelling. I didn't have to do too much tonight. This was an easy one for me. So, thank you for sharing your experiences with us. It's been really, really interesting, and want to say thank you to the chat for your comments, your questions. Great showing from them as usual. And just I'll put out there any final comments, get them into the chat really quick, you guys. Ray, give you an opportunity to say goodbye yourself, and anything else you'd like to mention before we end this.
No, I appreciate you having me on. Again, I love that opportunity, and I look forward to communicating, meeting new people as the year goes by, and see everybody at the National.
All right. Well, appreciate that. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Mark Santucci. Appreciate that. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Again, no sports cards live on Saturday night for the next 2 Saturdays, unfortunately, but we'll be back the three Saturdays from now. We will be having a few shows in the interim here on the channel. Thank you, Perk. Appreciate it. It's always great to hear Ray's stories and insight. Yeah, you have a great night yourself, Perk. Thank you for being here. All right, guys, that's it. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for joining, and have a great week ahead. I'll be back on Monday for MC Mondays Live, of course. No after hours tonight, Mid-Atlantic. Thanks for the request, though, but not tonight, everybody. Again, have a great week ahead. Have a great couple weeks ahead. We'll see you back here soon. This episode of Sports Cards Live is over.